Digital Dividend is a new range of spectrum which is being made available as a result of analogue television turn-off. So when you turn off analogue TV, it frees up around about 400 megahertz of spectrum which had previously been allocated to the broadcast industry. When that is turned off and people move to digital television, that spectrum can be reallocated. From the perspective of the mobile telecoms industry, we are looking at probably around about 100 megahertz of that spectrum being made available to mobile technologies. And the reason why it's of interest, particularly in relation to mobile broadband services and next generation technologies, is that first of all it'll be spectrum which is completely free. From the perspective of there aren't technologies allocated to that spectrum at that point in time, and because it's low frequency spectrum, it's looking like it will be allocated in 698 to 806 megahertz. It means it's very good for supporting large cells with high amounts of coverage and for in-building coverage. That makes it very valuable spectrum to have available for mobile services, because as well as being able to be focused on areas where new technologies will be allocated first, so inner city areas, metropolitan areas, areas of high revenue, it also lends itself to being able to cover outlying countryside areas, rural areas, because you can allocate one cell and that cell will be able to cover a very large area because of the frequency range that it's in. The harmonisation of spectrum allocation is important for two reasons. First of all, if I have a spectrum allocation in one country and the same spectrum allocated to mobile operators in the neighbouring country, but the band plans are shifted slightly or misaligned, the potential on the border between those two countries for interference is increased. So particularly in a situation where if I allocate a particular piece of spectrum to an uplink technology and the neighbouring country has it allocated for downlink, where it's paired spectrum, then you have crosstalk, and that results in interference and significant problems. Perhaps from a more global perspective, the alignment of spectrum and the usage of spectrum in an aligned fashion within a global ecosystem is massively important in terms of reducing R&D costs, both within the vendor community, because vendors then can address a large number of markets with a single development stream and hence a single allocation of R&D cost. So you then get economies of scale, which mean that the vendors are able to offer a cheaper price to the operators, which has a knock-on effect on the business case, which then means that the operators are able to sell the service for a lower cost, which means that it has greater mass market appeal from day one. But on top of that, the alignment of spectrum enables roaming to take place. So if I have a device which supports a certain band plan which I use within the UK, and I come to Hong Kong to do a conference and to do some interviews, and I find that the band plan in Hong Kong is the same, then that device can support both networks with one implementation of a radio interface within the device. And that means then that roaming business can take place between the operators in Hong Kong and the UK. And if you multiply that across all the other countries where perhaps I travel, or any business traveller or any consumer customer may go to, the greater the alignment between countries, the greater the capability of roaming and the reduction in bill of parts within the device to support all of those regions. So spectral alignment is ultimately the lifeblood, which means that GSM has become the 4 billion plus connections that it is today. UMTS has the 500 million connections it has today. HSPA has 300 million connections today. All of that is driven by scale. Moving forward to LTE, the alignment of spectrum within the digital dividend is fundamental to the overall success. I suspect that most operators will focus on LTE. Certainly the requirement to deploy LTE requires new spectrum if you don't happen to have spectrum asset available to you. And LTE is likely to be the technology which operators will focus their attentions on for at least the foreseeable future. So the capabilities of LTE within low frequency spectrum means that you can support more customers than you can with HSPA, because you have a higher capability in terms of active connections within a cell with LTE within the same amount of spectrum, and that means that you can take the service to more consumers. Some operators may look at HSPA and HSPA Plus within Digital Dividend, but certainly we expect most to focus. We see progress in probably in two key areas. From the perspective of Digital Dividend spectral alignment, we have been to a number of regulatory regimes, and there does seem to be growing consensus around, first of all, the spectrum which will be allocated, which appears to be the range from 698 to 806 megahertz within Asia, and then the alignment of the band plans within that spectrum. There are still people to be convinced, but we continue to lobby and we continue to promote the benefits of a strong alignment in spectrum allocation within the Digital Dividend. More generally, in terms of progress within Asia, the strength of LTE within Asia is very positive. Clearly, perhaps the more developed markets are moving first, so the adoption of LTE across all of the operators within Japan, growing adoption in Korea, higher levels of adoption within China are very positive signs for LTE as a global ecosystem. So Asia is strongly positioned within developing markets as being right at the forefront of the LTE deployments which are likely to take place around the globe. 2012, 2013 seems to be a very common kind of date which is being quoted as being a launch date for Asian markets outside of those which you'd traditionally expect to move first. And I think that LTE globally will begin to pick up within that timescale. It will be around about 2012 that you can consider LTE to be genuinely mass market as a global technology. And so to see Asia as a whole moving along those timescales as well is a very positive thing, because the size of the Asian market is so big. It can generate global scale and generate global ecosystem on its own, and to be part of that is fundamental to the success of LTE as a whole.